Greetings, welcome everyone to a new season of The X Button, and Happy New Year to all of you. I am one of your hosts for the X Button podcast, Alejandro. With me is the not quite sick, but still alive.
Hey everybody. I survived, but barely.
Yes. So yeah, Paul, we
man.
haven't... Well, obviously we have our text chat with our group. We texted all break, all the time,
Yeah.
send memes, send you a Riverdale paragraph that spent you. How you been? Like, I haven't seen you or your face in a while.
I know it's been a minute, and it feels like it's been an eternity since we actually recorded, seen each other's faces. We've both gotten sick in the span of time since
Jesus
we
Christ,
wrapped
yeah.
it up. Imagine if we were still trying to record and that happened.
Oof.
My goodness, I can still feel my deep breaths being let kind of. I hate it. But
Yeah,
we're
I'm in
both
recovery.
quarantining.
Yes. Just
Together,
remember-
he's right next to me.
Yeah. not this time. No, we're not doing the special background. So, but not to bury the lead, I got COVID. Like at the beginning of the year, like everyone in the world. Apparently, it's
All
so
of us.
funny. It's like it's not just in the U.S. It exploded. It feels like New Year's Eve, like everyone forgot or just decided to brave it up. And
Or despite our best efforts.
oh yes,
It's like I didn't even do anything and I still got it.
yes.
Well, I don't even know if I got it actually because I got the booster and I am feeling like crap.
And the worst part, I was gonna get my booster the week I got sick. So talk about sweet darn irony. But I will say I am thankful I got vaccinated when I did, because I tell you, this sickness really sucks. Really, 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 really sucks. You don't know how much COVID sucks until you get it and actually get symptoms for it. So for everyone that's still like maybe not taking COVID seriously or all that, I'll say this: ignore every stupid politician in this matter. Go to your doctor. Ask your
Please.
doctor. Your doctor will know better than these idiots that are politicizing this stupid virus. So I'm thankful for my doctor, because then he provided me with the perfect medicine. And I tell you, ginger tea, savior. Ginger tea saved me right now. And
I need to go get some of that.
Oh yes, ginger tea with lemon, perfect.
I've been doing peppermint personally.
It's kind of
very
similar.
soothing.
Yes, it really soothes, and it helped me like recover some breath that I wasn't feeling. So
Yeah.
but I'm feeling so much better now. Hopefully I don't get too winded, because in the time that I've been like locked down in this room that no one can see, thanks to my background, I've been almost gone stir crazy by being in my locked room with like no windows.
It's a good thing that at least you have an interest that keeps you having a portal into all the worlds you could possibly want.
Absolutely. A time for a good escape.
Hey.
So, and on that note, Paul, so usually how our shows go for everyone that's coming in for the first time, for those people, welcome. Usually the structure of our show initially was like what we have been playing, then we transition to the news, and then we transition to a topic depending on the time, because sometimes we may go very long-winded that in some sections that they were like, yeah, I think that kind of takes care of it.
Sometimes we put tinfoil hats on.
Yes.
Sometimes we shout at each other.
Exactly.
Sometimes one
we're
of us
arguing.
has a really bad opinion about something. It's
Oh,
great.
yes. Oh yeah. So, but in this case, we're here to mostly celebrate, because this is the episode that I thought we were gonna do back in December, but then I decided, you know what? Let's not rush. Let's take some time, play through some of our backlog, so then we can come back and the first thing we do is talk about what our game of the year is individually. We don't have a collective. This is the X Bottoms game of the year, because Paul and I, we have different tastes, different opinions. So you can hear what was our favorite game of the year. What were some that maybe didn't quite crack a top 10, and then what were some that bombed us out as most disappointing. So Paul, we are skewing what we've been playing this time. No need to talk about the news. All people need to know is that NFTs have come to invade our medium, and it's a horror story. It feels like I read NFT stories every day since I started my quarantine after getting sick, and I feel that was like a second level of hell. And E3 got canceled again, and it's back to being a digital thing. So we'll get to that when we get there. If it even is, exactly.
People are saying that it might not exist at all now.
They're not gonna be involved with it like they were last year. So And I don't even know what else of important news came out. So we'll get back to the role in
We'll
a week
catch
or
up
two.
with all that.
Yeah, and there will be old news, and we're gonna get new ones. So, Paul, it is time to talk about the year that was 2021. Before we dive into what are going to be our honorable mentions, top level, what do you think of gaming in 2021?
If I'm being entirely honest, it's funny because I have one side, which is you, Zach, and PJ saying one side of the gaming industry, and then I have a very consumer side with some friends talking about it, and they have been so negative about this year, but I could not disagree more, I think. Overall, there was like a few misses and missed opportunities, but overall, I've had an amazing time with gaming. I've changed my mentality for digesting some games, and I've enjoyed myself so much more with the less time and less games I think I've played. And overall, it's led me to really be able to take in things a lot better. And now I feel like games are back to the point where they're coming out faster than I can finish enjoying a previous one, and that has not happened for a long time. I used to burn through games in like 3 or 4 days. I would sit there, just be dying, not able to enjoy games I already own. Always it was about the next thing, but now I'm walking through slowly like 3 or 4 games that I've purchased over the last couple of months, and man, it's like I'm not even close to ready for February, and I hope that I can actually catch up before that happens. And some of these that are on my top 10 list, I haven't even been able to finish,
and that's okay, but you still enjoy them.
My time, but that's the best part of it. So that's what my biggest change has been. What about you?
So 2021 is definitely not 2020 or 2018 or 2017. Those banger years that kind of like define a generation. 2021 reminds me a lot of 2019, where you didn't have your big marquee title, but it gave you such variety if you were willing to look for that variety. That I feel like it gave me more variety in gaming than I've had in many years. Especially, here's the thing that pleases me the most. Other than one game, no open world cracked my top 10. Like in the Ubisoft style, the ones that I've been like decrying for years, that the open world genre has been like so done to death to me that I just got sick of it, and realized that I kind of got a lot of the experiences I personally like as a gamer. That I was like, you know what, that's kind of nice that I found some variety in 2021, so I can't really be mad. But I will say that at the same time, it reminds me of 2019, where there were many great games that it was hard for one to be like, this was the game of the year. So up until this recording, I didn't know which one was my game of the year. So,
but what a great problem to have, where you can't decide what your favorite was.
Exactly. But at another times where it was easy, because one clearly was like a monumental step up from the other ones that made it easy. This is the best time that I had with a game this year. I had so many different experiences with the game this year that they all were great in their own way. They all had their drawbacks, but I had a lot of good times, and my honorable mentions were bigger than I would even expected. So I think that's a good problem to have. So now let's talk about the ones that are not in our top 10, the honorable mentions, games that we still play, we enjoyed, but didn't quite want to give them the full marks. And I want you to start with your first game.
All right. I put these into my honorable mentions for 2 reasons. One was that, like you said, they're either not quite enough to make it to the top 10, or there was one aspect that disqualified it from being able to be there.
Or you didn't finish them.
Or like I didn't finish them enough. My first one was going to be actually Elite Dangerous.
Oh, really?
For my honorable mentions, because I qualified it enough because there was such a huge update in the last year that made it basically a new game, much more capable of being digested and handled. That was when we were recording, and I mentioned that my whole friend group got on it, which is like a totally different game after that point. But the reason I couldn't put it on my top 10 is probably because I technically had played it long before when it like came out on console. So it wasn't really a full recreation or re-experience of it,
Mhm.
and it wasn't quite enough to be there, but I had so much fun with it over the course of like an entire month and a half or something that it had to earn its spot over here. So props to Elite Dangerous for that one.
Makes
And
sense.
you said we wanted to kind of list through,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Let's through all of them right now.
The next one was going to be Insurgency Sandstorm, which
Mhm.
I'm not going to talk much about that. I've already done it. It was a great tactical first-person shooter. I had a lot of fun. Reminded me of my old Rainbow Six days.
Mhm.
However, it does not have a lot of polish on console, and not a lot of content either. Once you've kind of experienced all of it,
Mhm.
and most of it is just playing through it with friends, playing through it with different maps, and trying to recreate your own fun out of it. So that's why that one doesn't quite make it. Demon Souls for
Mhm.
honorable mention. That one is because I did not finish enough of it to consider it
Mhm.
in the top 10. I enjoyed most of every minute that I played with it. It's so polished, it's
Great
so
remake.
gorgeous. The mechanics are solid. I noticed that everything moves slower than other Dark Souls games and Bloodborne and stuff, where it's
Mhm.
like breakneck pace with those. Demon Souls, by contrast, is a much slower and more methodical game. I did not realize that until I was 20 plus hours in,
Mhm.
and I like the feel of it because it's a lot easier because of that. I can process so much more in that slow moment, but it's no less punishing. So I think they've struck a really nice balance out of it, and I want to go back when I get some more time
Mhm.
and finish it finally. Um, Next was going to be Outriders.
Oh yeah, the one
You
that I convinced you.
convinced me. I tried it after you talked to me about it, and I burned through that game while my wife and I watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine,
Mhm.
and just crushed through a lot of that game, and I still feel like I have a
Really
lot
fun, right?
left. I think I'm like level 15 or something. What's the
Mhm.
level cap on that?
I don't think there is one, but
Okay.
you stop getting upgrades for like your abilities at
Yeah,
level
that's what I'm
22.
wondering.
So
22. Okay, so I'm like 5 or 6, 7 levels away. But yeah, so I'm enjoying the heck out of it, and then I bit off a little more than I could chew and raised the world tier
mm,
really hard. Like there was a point that I just could not beat this area because there wasn't enough cover. They had a lot of range on me, and I
mhm.
was getting crushed. But
Don't as a tip, don't feel bad about lowering world tier if
yeah,
it's kicking your
so
butt.
I
The game
had
even tells
to.
you that. It's like world tier is so great at pushing you, at kind of like giving you that extra. Do you want slightly better rewards? You can try pushing up if you want,
Right.
and
But
it's
then
really
like
good at
it
that.
doesn't kneecap you for lowering it
Hmm.
again, which is really nice. So it was like almost there. And if I played more of it, it might honestly be on my top 10 list, or if I even played more classes, but it's a game that I'd like to revisit.
We are going to.
Um,
I'll tell you. I was the one
I
that
know
told you to
we
buy it
do
for the
have to
price.
play it.
Yeah.
And so at least we both have it now. And the
Hmm.
last one, oh, it was going to be like top 5 for me this year if I had finished it in the year of 2021. But Return of Obra Dinn
Mm. Cool
is
game. Hmm.
fantastic. I knew when it came out I would be interested in it, but I was so worried of how obstinate the mystery aspects of the game would be,
Hmm.
because mystery games can sometimes be really obtuse, really confusing, and I didn't want to get frustrated out of it. But I'm so glad I waited for a sale and picked it up, because worked through that whole game, and I loved it so much I actually replayed it with my wife and let her figure the stuff out as
That's
well,
awesome.
and like just giving her little hints to let us finish it in one sitting. And it was such a good experience for me that like even the second time I was enjoying it just as much, because my goodness, the storyline that you work through, the way I felt smart, which as you know I usually don't when I play games,
Hmm.
because I don't think in the same vein as some people. But when you leave it open enough that you can come up with your own conclusions in so many different options, that one of those options is going to be the way I think. So it worked out really well for me. But like I said, the only reason it wasn't on the top 10 is because I
It's old.
started it on like the 28th, 29th, and I finished it not until like the 6th of January this year. So
Mhm.
maybe by the end of this year it'll make it. But
Yeah.
man, that was a lot of fun. So that's my honorable mentions. What do you got?
So, first game on my honorable mentions, Destiny 2. So
Hey.
so Destiny 2, my obsession. We talked a lot of how that game's like crack cocaine for me. That and Assassin's Creed Odyssey, games that I just lose myself to. Destiny 2 had an interesting 2021 in that it was the first year in the series that they had no expansion at all. Because Beyond Light came out in November 2020, which was in my top 10 for 2020. I enjoyed Beyond Light a lot, even though I preferred Forsaken. Destiny 2 had probably the best seasons they've had. Like Season of the Chosen, Season of the Splicer, and Season of the Lost were so good. Especially Splicer for me, because that's the one that brought back the raid, the Vault of Glass. And on top of that, had the best collection of weapons. And Transmog. Oh, yes, Transmog. Yep. Even though Transmog wasn't as great as it could have been.
That is very true. But it was enough that I was like, oh, thank God.
Yes.
But, well, actually, yeah, since you're talking about that, should I mention that?
You have it in your top 10, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you can talk about it now.
Okay, cool. Because that, as you know, that was when I reintroduced myself to Destiny entirely from the first year. I haven't touched it since.
Yeah, you came back at the end of Chosen into Splicer, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it had just begun was Splicer, and I experienced that entire season, experienced all of Lost, and now the anniversary. But
oh my God, the anniversary! The weapons we got from the anniversary, so good.
My ups and downs were vast. As you know, there were a lot of valleys and a lot of peaks, but I enjoyed myself so much with Beyond Light, because I didn't touch Forsaken, I didn't touch Shadowkeep, and everything else, so it was like all new to me.
You played everything after year one, basically. You stopped with year one.
I stopped with year one, which was the Red War, and I was just like, God, this is not really what I'm hoping for out of Destiny, so I dropped off on it. But I'm so glad I picked it back up, because it was so fun. The mechanics, the feel of just one of the best first-person shooters. Even still, I think outdoing Halo.
Oh yeah, especially in some ways, in many ways. So.
It's like it's got a certain level of polish and mobility to it that I adore in first-person shooters. That is few and far between able to be recreated. But what are some more thoughts that you have?
Yeah, and on Destiny 2, just getting to play with you joining the clan. You unfortunately not being able to finish the raid, but me being able to being able to like run it many times with other groups and getting such great loot out of it, and getting to play it on next gen finally this year, especially after I've been playing through the PS4 version for forever.
Frames per second, oh my goodness. I remember I told you when I reinstalled it on PS5 and moved around to 60 frames per second, I went, oh, okay,
you were like, no, frame rate doesn't matter. I was like, no, it does, until you actually get to feel it.
Like some games will say 60 frames per second and it doesn't feel like it, but this was a game that felt like 60 frames per second.
Yes, and it's super smooth. So, and the only reason Destiny 2 wasn't in my top 10 is that I just found some really good games for this year, like substantive games that I felt okay putting in an honorable mention, but it could have easily cracked top 10. I really enjoyed this year for Destiny, and I'm so excited. In a month and a half, we're getting Destiny 2 The Witch Queen. So more substantive stuff coming for Destiny. Another game for my honorable mentions, Marvel's Avengers, specifically War for Wakanda. I highlight that because the War for Wakanda expansion that came out this year was legitimately decent. Like, that came in with the gameplay loop I wanted that thing to have, so I could really engage in the service element that I always have kept lambasting throughout this past year. That the story of Avengers, really good. Everything else sucks. I convinced you to play the campaigns of that, and you enjoyed yourself with those campaigns.
I did, actually.
And
I'm glad I finished it.
Yes, exactly. And you already played the good parts. And the good thing is that it had a decent enough loop with new armor that they introduced, and also some quality of life stuff that came in after, that made Avengers more enjoyable than it has been, but still not quite there yet for it to qualify for this is some of the best things that have happened this year. And then, of course, like, we got the Spider-Man content that was very bittersweet. I enjoyed playing as the character. I hate that because of the deal that was made to him, they had to make as minimum viable content as possible with him. So very bittersweet there. But yeah, I will always, like, until that game dies, Avengers is always going to be a guilty pleasure for me, because I just enjoy those characters. I just enjoy the idea of the game. I like the mechanics of it. So The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD, another honorable mention for me. This game.
Did you finish it?
No. Hence why it's here.
Yeah.
I tried so hard, and that's still a game that what I like, I really like. What I don't like, I truly hate, and it just balances out. And I was hoping, I was crossing my fingers, this was gonna be it. This was gonna be the moment where Skyward Sword turned the corner for me.
Same.
But it didn't. It just didn't. I got used to the controls the controls that you couldn't, because you couldn't break your mind with the hold the left shoulder, move the right stick to move the camera, and release that so you can do
that
combat.
Single-handedly might have ruined the experience for me. I could not make it happen in the time that the game wants me to.
Yeah, and I did, but my problem was that the game in between its dungeons, which are amazing, it's so boring. So that's why, like, it's still there. I might travel soon. I may play it as a handheld game, so it's still just chilling there. But yeah, Skyward Sword, I always said it's the weakest of the 3D Zelda games, and even though this is probably the best way to play it right now, it's still not. We're hoping this year will be the year, Paul. We're gonna get the ones that we want. Let's cross your fingers.
The anniversary and everything, and they were just like, oh yeah, it's the what was it, like 35th or something?
The 35th anniversary. Yeah, 35th. Oh. Yeah, Mario got better treatment the 35th anniversary, and I understand why they pushed Skyward Sword, because if the availability of the other ones was there, no one was going to no one was gonna buy it, so I get it, but we got through it now. It's there. It's done. It's there. Please, Nintendo, just give us Twilight Princess and Wind Waker, please. Please. Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. I put this in an honorable mention because the only notable thing about this package for me was actually Bowser's Fury. That's the only thing that I beat from this package. It was pretty cool. Bowser's Fury, interesting idea of what an open world Mario could be. More than Odyssey, because Odyssey's kind of like going into that direction. Bowser's Fury kind of like toying more with that. It's held back a little bit by the fact that they use the 3D World engine that's not meant for a 3D open world, so it kind of breaks your mind if you go from Odyssey to that. Like our friend Zach was telling us, like, that broke his mind. That it felt like a step back, because 3D World mechanics works in 3D World levels, which I haven't beaten. They're still there. I'm kind of like mini Switch games I don't touch unless there was a very specific one that I just kind of want to save them if I travel. So I just kind of save the 3D World levels for whenever that happens.
That's kind of happened for me with the Mario Anniversary Collection, where I'll play Sunshine if I don't have anything else. I have a file on that where I'll play it, and Skyward Sword maybe will end up being that same category. But part of me wants to now visit Fire Emblem Three Houses, so that may just never happen for those.
Yeah, that's 2 years away now. Well, yeah, 3 years almost. 2019. Yep. We're in 2022, Paul. I keep forgetting that. Time has no meaning. Death's Door. This is a Zelda-like adventure released by the Devolver Digital. A lot of people were raving about this game, especially when it came out. When it came out on Xbox first, I got the PS5 version on sale, and really cute idea, really hard game. I like its aesthetic. It has some cool stuff to it. Barely played it, so no way it was gonna crack my top 10.
All right.
IGN's Game of the Year, Forza Horizon 5, is in my honorable mentions. And
forgot about that one.
Yeah, that one came out this year, and the most beloved of the Forza games that people were championing for it to be nominated for the Game Awards, because everyone's was aghast that in the full nominations Forza Horizon got snubbed. And I only played a little bit of it on PC, and that's a game that I'm hoping eventually I get an Xbox Series X and S and play it through there, because my computer, I needed to download some weird drivers because the game was like chugging, and I think you have a little bit of a problem with that one.
I did, which if I had to redo it, I think I'd put Forza Horizon 5 in my honorable mentions as well, because I kind of forgot it existed. But that was the same problem. I loved the game until it would just... I'd be going fast enough and the game would freeze the whole system. The problem is it would freeze your car, but not everyone else's car. So if I was at a certain speed ahead of them, it would just bulk us all up, and then when it would catch up and restart, it would act as if we were all in a clump together.
Yeah, and
So
you
I'm
have
like, what the
a
heck?
weaker computer because I saw your specs. You have like a 1080. I
Yeah.
have a 2060, so technically I have better specs than you, which
Right.
worked really well with another of the big Xbox games that came out on PC this year.
Mhm.
And I could have made it work on Forza, but because it was a huge file and I needed some space in the computer at the time, I was like, this is a game that I highly respect. I think it deserves its accolades. I mean, IGN gave it a freaking game of the year for the first time, a racing game. And that's IGN. So it deserves its props. Another game that deserves its props, Psychonauts 2. Psychonauts 2, honorable mention for me. I also haven't been in it. I haven't quite played much of it. There's something about this game's aesthetic that just unnerves me because it's the Tim Burton Nightmare Before Christmas kind of visual aesthetic that
It's very bothersome.
it's very bothersome, but there's just something about this game that I kind of wanted to play more of it. I was playing it on Xbox One, it was fine, but I got to download the PC version, and in fact, that was a game that I kind of wanted to play late last year, early this year, just as we were gearing up for this, because I know Psychonauts 2, that was one of the 6 nominated games from the Game Awards. A lot of people go to bat to this game. Our friend PJ, that's one of the few, because he barely plays anything. He was like, this has to be Game of the Year, plus this other one.
Okay, PJ.
Yes, but that's the thing, like, Psychonauts 2 is like beloved by many.
It is, and I actually, if I get ever again some time, I want to download it because it's on Game Pass and just play through at least the second one.
Yeah,
I
so
never
the first game.
rest of the series.
Yeah, I tried playing through the first game. It's just too old. It's just way too
Okay.
old at this point. That there's a certain point with all games that there has been too many advancements happening that trying to go back to them, it's gonna just be hard. Especially if you don't have the mental fortitude to put yourself back there. Especially when the genre that it's on has improved tenfold since then.
Which I experienced that trying to replay Jack 2.
Ooh.
And that's a game that's like, there's
That's a
so
hard
many
one.
advancements now that you just can't really go back to it without the real, like, I am going to finish this kind of mentality.
Yeah. We're older, we're wiser, we know what we should dedicate our time to, and sometimes you just have to let go. Maybe leave memories be memories. Final honorable mention, this will surprise you, Resident Evil Village.
Yeah, well, hey, you know what? It probably wouldn't have made it here until yesterday for you.
I will say, I'll just be honest, like the beginning section of this game, not very good. I was not vibing with it, especially when you're fighting the Lycans. It was, I don't know, it was just not clicking with me. I remember I texted him, he was like, I'm not vibing with this.
I agree, honestly. I did not like the village section, but it
the
wasn't
initial
until
village section.
Yes, it wasn't until after I experienced a good chunk of the rest of the game that I knew that was like, all right, I get through this, and then the rest of the game can happen, and it was all better from there, I think.
Yeah.
But go ahead and give me more of your thoughts.
As soon as you meet with the Dimitrescu's,
Yeah.
that's when that game goes. Castle Dimitrescu, lovely place. Enjoy the heck out of playing through that, fighting through, hoping that you're not gonna get stomped by this 9-foot tall vampire lady, or like trying to dodge their fly daughters that just dissolve and do that weird stuff. And really great design. I really love the visual identity of the castle, and I kind of wish more time happened there. And obviously I haven't finished it yet, so I try to at least put games that I've actually finished in my top 10. I can see a scenario where Village could have been there, but
just
gotta play
from
more.
the ending of the game, the final level, final moments, I think will elevate it for you. That's my thought. And we can talk about it once you actually finish it. But since that is on my list as well, I'll briefly talk about it.
It's in your top 10, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So obviously I'm not going to talk spoilers, but just from a plot standpoint, I have been more excited for the future of Resident Evil, and I think I said this almost
Mm-hmm.
word for word to y'all when I finished it, than I have been in a lot of years,
Mm-hmm.
because they are merging the timelines somewhat, not
Mm-hmm.
like in a literal sense, but in a spiritual, all right, we're going to now move into the next phase of what Resident Evil is going to become, instead of like trying to retread old ground. They're letting their remakes do that
Mm-hmm.
so that their new stuff can be completely new.
Yeah.
And that's what I respect that. And I'm very interested in following along with whatever's going on as far as
What makes me excited about having playing through Village right now, because I'm gonna keep playing right now as I'm still locked down. That's kind of like the game I just kind of want to devour right now because I'm finally in it. It really makes me excited about finally this engine being used in Resident Evil 4, because this game is so Resident Evil 4 in so many ways that it almost feels like a proof of concept for whenever they finally hit that remake, which is, for all intents and purposes, going to happen. And even from the merchant, it's hilarious in Village. This big, massive, chunky dude that's like a giant baby.
I get a kick out of that guy.
Yeah, it's just, it feels, there's a weird dissonance in how realistic Resident Evil depicted itself with 7. That 8 is just so cartoonish despite being a sequel to that one. That sometimes breaks my mind.
That's what I wanted to mention as well briefly, because the RE engine lends itself really well to the realistic, like photorealistic levels. But if you go too close to that with humans, normally it can freak out a little bit. For 7, it hit that uncanny valley for me. But 8, there's only been like 1 or 2 little moments where I felt like it didn't line up, but they stylized the realistic proportions so well that somebody like, what's the wife's name? I'm blanking out all of a sudden.
I forgot her
Yeah.
name. Because
Okay,
I know
so anyway, the
Rose,
wife's
Mia. I think it's Maya.
Mia. That's it.
Yeah.
So Mia had really weird faces in 7, but in 8 they like stylized her just a little bit to make her the most realistic she could be. Chris looks fantastic, and like, with people getting up in your face, you need to have those details spot on, and I think they nail that perfectly with it. Just that balance between realistic and like cartoonishly actiony, campy.
And I will say that I'm glad that I waited, because I had an opportunity to play this game back in May when we were kind of like in a drought spell. I still didn't have my next gen console. I could play it on PS4. I'm glad I didn't.
Ooh, yeah, I'm glad you did as well, because yeah, I only played on PS5 and I forgot they made it for PS4 as well. I can only imagine that it probably struggled a little bit.
Frame rate not much, but visually, oof.
Yeah, I imagine.
So that was all my honorable mentions, Paul. Before we dive into our top 10 in more detail, we gotta take a little detour.
Yes, we do.
Into the games that bummed us out. I have 5, you have 4. Hit me with one.
I have actually a couple of them. The first one is going to be Oddworld Soulstorm.
Really?
Yes. So I wanted to give this game the benefit of the doubt. I do also want to clarify, this is not worst games. This is just most disappointed.
Yeah.
So the first experience with the Oddworld series was that weird first-person sci-fi shooter on the Xbox, the original.
Ooh, yeah.
So that dates it. So that's what I thought Oddworld was, and then realizing the whole rest of the series was not that at all. I went, oh shoot, this is weird. Odd, I guess. Which it takes itself so seriously that I understand that it's going for something very specific. That is not what I'm looking for, I guess, because it's how do you know when something's being funny if it's being too serious about it, it's like, and if you try to,
if you're in on the joke, if you're in on the joke, or if it knows that it's being not serious, so like if it's like a self-parody or not.
Right. So, like, the problem is if you're seeing it as an outsider and you critique it, they're like, oh no, it's supposed to be satire, and they're not supposed to take it that like seriously like that. Or it's like, well, where do I draw the line? How do I know as a media person coming into it if I don't know that to begin with? So anyway, it felt strange. It was really polished, but it just had such a esoteric style of gameplay, so it wasn't for me. Do you want me to list all of these, or
let's go one by one on this one?
So yeah, that's really it for me on that one.
I
What
have
you
to
got?
immediately jump to this one because I talked about it in our last show, and I need to amend a bunch of things.
Oh, let's hear it.
Pray for the gods.
Yeah.
I'm
You were a little excited about
yeah,
that one,
yeah.
Alejandro.
I haven't made it secret that Shadow of the Colossus is a game I hold very near and dear to my heart, and
Yeah.
the wheels started coming off of that one when I was playing it. When we talked about it, my
Hmm.
initial excitement about someone having done that kind of game uh, immediately was like, okay, I know that they gamified this. I'm not clicking with this. And then when I started fighting some of the final bosses, it's like this game is glitchy AF. This game is like
Hmm.
doesn't feel like it's tuned properly, and it was just a big disappointment. It just was, and the idea of it existing is better than actually playing it. I feel forever now. I am like at the point where like I don't want anyone to ever try to do Shadow of the Colossus again. Shadow of the Colossus happened once, happened in 2005. Its pure idea of just being a boss rush game in an empty world only worked in 2005. Modern expectations for what people want in open world games doesn't fit with Pray for the Gods. There's nothing worse than you exploring, having to be like having the cold completely render you weak in your way to the boss, that then when you reach a boss, you're basically fighting that boss with as minimum health as possible because of the world being so tough on you, that then like when the whole point of you fighting this boss is figuring out the mechanic of how you get there and how to beat him, and having all this survival BS kind of just hindered your enjoyment. And on top of it not being really polished at all, the frame rate being all over the place, the controllers sucking, like you never getting a hold of the automatic nature of when you hold. Shadow of the Colossus did it well, where you always have to be holding the button where you to be
Yep.
grabbing. It's like I don't know why they didn't copy that tenfold. It always felt like you were never in control when you wanted to let go or trying to jump,
Yeah.
and especially with the overly aggressive nature of the beasts. And the ending was kind of cool. That made me appreciate some, like there's a level of scale to the final boss that it's like a collection of many of them that are like fire, that kind of makes it cool. But I'm like, I don't think I ever want to play through this ever again. It was just so, it lacks that certain kind of polish that I expect from a title. And obviously this game was only made by 3 people, but there's like a litany of people that contributed to it, and I appreciate the effort, but I can't in any way, shape, or form recommend this game. Like, especially for anyone that appreciated what Shadow of the Colossus was. This was the proof, finally, that that game, I'm glad it exists, and I'm glad its pure form can be retained now with that remake that they did in 2018, and no one else should do this kind of game again. Hit me with another one.
All right. Next one was This Is the Police. I briefly mentioned this during one of our what have we been playing, and there's not too much that I wanted to add beyond the fact that I wanted to clarify the mechanics are perfect for this game. The aesthetic is fantastic. I love it. It is the overly hmm, the forced nature of the mechanics of the game, similar to what we briefly talked about with Nakey Jakey's Red Dead Redemption 2 video, where you have a certain level of freedom and the illusion of choice, but if you want to try actually choosing something unconventional, you get slapped down and there's not actually a choice at all. That is where this is the police is thriving, because it's the idea of you're managing this group of police, and like it's this cool little model of a city, and things are happening in the city. You have a certain amount of personnel, you have to dispatch them, make decisions based on that, similar to something like Banner Saga. And then it plays out through the text on if it pans out or not. But the problem is that no matter what you do, it's always the wrong choice, and the game slaps you over the head to say, oh, you idiot, you thought you could like be nice about this, you're horrible. But then like if you try to be harsh, they're like, oh, you're such a terrible person for being harsh on this. And the story is reflecting that, where there was a a guy that used to be your buddy, and he's in debt to the mob, and he asks you to help him. And I was curious, so I looked up what the options are to help this guy or not.
Mm-hmm.
And if you help him, he ends up getting like, you end up getting in debt to the mob anyway, and the game berates you for it, for like offering some of your morality. But if you don't help him, he gets killed, and then the game berates you for not letting your morality go through on your decision. And I'm like, what do you want me to do, guys? Are you just going to yell at me for being a decent person or not a decent person? Like, I feel like I can't win, so I just gave up on the game. So that's where, like, I just don't appreciate when certain games do something like that. And they're like, well, it doesn't matter what you actually choose, we're just going to be mean to you all the time, no matter what. So that's just something that I've realized I don't enjoy in games and in any media, really. So that's what I would say on that. What do you got next?
Grand Theft Auto the Trilogy Definitive Edition. I will
yeah,
in this one,
gosh.
yes, obviously you can make an argument that was probably the biggest piece of crap that released in 2021, because for what it means, I only played one of those games. It was the San Andreas they put out on Game Pass, and even then, it's like the rain being rendered beneath the ocean,
That's
the FUBAR
fun.
character models, the erratic frame rate. It's like it stood in such contrast with what Rockstar has been known for over the past few years, like a bastion of quality, someone that respects their
this wasn't
IP.
even made by Rockstar in the end,
and that makes it even worse, because then they just farmed it out. Then that means that they have such little regard for quality these days, since they released Red Dead Redemption 2, which, remember, I played again through this year, and it stood in higher contrast with. I cannot believe the same company would allow this trilogy of the 3 games that put them on the map, because obviously they had other stuff. They had Manhunt, they had State of Emergency, which is one of the worst games they've made. They had the original 2 GTAs that were top down, but GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas is like what made GTA, and Rockstar what Rockstar is, was this trilogy. And it's insanity that they let that thing out like that. There was no need. It needed more time in the oven. It needed more time to... They had the right idea with the art style, but in practice, that art style was so god ugly in gameplay. I just couldn't believe it.
If the art style had worked, I would have really appreciated what they were trying to do. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It did not look right at all.
Yeah, and then removing the old versions of the games, doing that, and then in tandem listing all the improvements. And I was like, because I was in the show, I literally said, with these improvements that they've listed, why would you ever want to go to those old games? After playing through them, these improvements are like this in comparison to just how effed up beyond all relief the entire package is. And
then don't forget the other problem being that because they delisted the original versions, that means all mods ever created for the original ones are completely null and void.
Yeah, mods that did better work. And that's the problem. Yes. It's like the mod scene did better work, like updating and cleaning up the experience that puts the definitive edition in even worse light. It's like it was last year's Cyberpunk, basically. It was like in execution. So yeah, that's another one. Hit me with another one.
Another one I've got, this is going to be 2 much smaller ones. The Stranger of Paradise demo.
Yeah, it's where it came out this year. So,
I have to at least mention that existed, which I just famously did not vibe with at all. But
man, we're gonna have quite a conversation when we get to most anticipated games.
Part of me really wants to. I'm looking forward to seeing how it actually plays out in the actual practice, but we'll see. I'll
still stand by, like, before you move, I have nothing with Stranger of Paradise because it was just a demo, but I still stand behind the fact that you needed to play that game on casual story to finally enjoy it. So I have always that caveat.
I just had to list it for posterity. And then the other one was, I mean, I wouldn't say it was it was just like a fart in the wind. It was the small indie game that I got called Submerged, which was just, it was like palette swap nonsense, just bare minimum work going into it. And I remember it at one of like the indie showcases of like, this is what's gonna be coming up next. Look at this cool, like riding a boat through a submerged city. It's really cool. Help your brother and all of the overgrown environments. It looks awesome. And then you play it and it's like a PlayStation 2 game. And it was just not fun at all. I'm so glad I only wasted like $2 on it. So
so that was your entire list for most disappointing one, right?
No, I have two more.
Oh, okay.
That I remembered one of them, and then the other one right before we recorded. But do you have any more?
Yeah, Far Cry 6.
Yeah, okay.
So Far Cry 6, initially when I talked about the game, when I got it on the sale, it was like 3-4 episodes before we went on break.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, it's like, there's something about the vibe of this game. It seems like they're finally getting it. They're finally gonna get the seriousness of the subject matter, which in that case was the dictatorship of like a Latin American country, which, not that I'm in one, but I have an idea how that looks like.
You're a neighbor of one.
Yeah, I'm a neighbor of one, Nicaragua. So that immediately was like, that seriousness went out the door as soon as you met that alligator called Guapo.
Guapo.
Yeah. And then the massive scale, the amount of stuff, how stuffy that game is, and how still similar to Far Cry it is, that it was just the perfect example of Ubisoft's now broken open world format. That I couldn't play more of that game. I was still stuck in that first island that was big enough, and then looking at that massive map that was coming up next, I was like, I have no time or the will to play through a game this big and this frankly mediocre. Like that, like
it's exactly what I am imagining with Dying Light 2, with the topical joke that we've been on right now.
Exactly. It's like knowing that it's just a big long game, and me kind of like feeling like the Far Cry formula worked perfectly in Far Cry 3, and I feel worked fairly well in Far Cry 4. In 5, that's when the wheels started kind of getting up getting up the car at that point for me. But I still kind of enjoy it. But I feel, especially kind of like I mentioned, in a year where I realized that I had found so much enjoyment in non-open world games, I just couldn't justify the time. Maybe sometime this year there will be a dry spell. Usually these are the kind of games, I mean, a dry spell, it could work. But yeah, Far Cry 6 not vibing with me. Yeah,
got it. Mine actually, for most disappointing, I put Skyward Sword HD, because
Fine.
You know what, I
Yeah.
realized how disappointed I really was in the end with that. Like, I was genuinely so excited to revisit that world, and parts of it, like the music, I still think hits so good. The moments with immense tenseness fighting against was Girahim, I think.
Yeah,
was
Girahim,
his name.
the vampire like demon lord.
Yeah,
right?
that weird guy with the crazy tongue. I remember actually enjoying myself in the sword fight with him, and the huge like golden thing with all the many arms. I really enjoyed that, and just the story between Link and Zelda. Even freaking, what was his name? Groose.
Groose.
I love his character development from absolute craphead to like a really enjoyable dude. But just everything about it, I realized that game development has moved ahead so far, and I didn't even feel like I was walking around in an actual world once I was on the ground. It felt like
you were floating through it.
Yeah, that, and I felt like it was so restrictive that it wasn't even like really a world as much as it was a small path to follow. Where I was just like, man, our standards have grown so much for what is actually considered this open-ended kind of world.
Yeah, and I would have I almost consider putting it in most disappointing. Like, to me, that carries it is just thinking how much I enjoy the things that I really like about it. But again, the things to not like about Skyward Sword, they're massive, more than any other Zelda games. And I think I don't know if you agree with that, but I think you can make a case that you can call this Skyward Sword HD thing. I'm most disappointed by how little effort Nintendo put into the thing.
If they
That
put some real effort into transforming it to modern control schemes, like
they just got
I
halfway
would
there.
have enjoyed the heck out of it. But like they tried to put a little bit of quality control in, and I respect them for it, but they just didn't put enough effort in.
Minimum viable effort, basically.
Yeah.
So.
So yeah, that was it for that. Did you have any others?
Yeah, I would hope, based on the conversation we've had, we're not going to finish most disappointed without talking about Battlefield 2042.
That is correct.
Yes.
That was my last one on here.
Same. What did I tell you back at E3 when they announced that this game was just going to be multiplayer only, a full price next gen title?
I was willfully ignorant.
You're willfully optimistic. That's what happened.
Yes, that is more correct.
And to me, like, the wheels forever came off of this game by the time we got to the beta. And just it didn't help that before that, Halo Infinite, a game that I think we're gonna talk about later in our top 10, both equal in
maybe
maybe or maybe not, they had such a rock solid beta that everyone screamed, hey, release this is ready. And then seeing Battlefield, like the state that Battlefield was at in that beta, and just thinking what the history of Battlefield has been in the PS4, Xbox One generation, with the very first Battlefield being a complete broken mess, and only Battlefield 1 being the only game that by the time it released was like rock solid and everyone praised, that I was like, I cannot believe history is repeating itself with the possibility that Battlefield 2042 could end up the holiday's most disappointing game based on quality and lack of content. And I bought it when it was on sale for $48, and hoping, because at that point 300 patches, like 300 fixes had come in one of the patches. I was like, that's insane. And part of me what this is like, Battlefield is a personification of this category. The core of the game is good. There's a solid framework to it. But so much of this game is so undercooked. The menus are a mess. The map rotation just in the main mode, like where you sometimes don't see maps despite them telling you there's more of them, and then you're just kind of stuck in that loop. How this game is literally carried by a portal of the old games. Basically remasters of some maps from the old games. That's the only reason why you would play through this thing. And they still wanted to charge $70 for this sucker when its most immediate competition, Call of Duty Vanguard, which I didn't either put in honorable mention here or in most disappointing, because it was in that weird space where it was nothing. Yeah, it was nothing. But even then, it's like, if I would have to recommend someone for a shooter, like in the AAA space for a shooter, it's like between these two, I would say go the Call of Duty route, because at least for the price that they're asking for you, it's like there's more of a game there. Whereas in Battlefield, it's like, it's insanity that they had the audacity to ask for that price, and for it to be as technically busted as it was, that it lost 70% of its player base within 2 weeks of when it came out. And on top of that, Battlefield 5, a game that no one is that much of a fan of, and that DICE literally cut support so quickly because they had to move on to this one. More people are playing it now. And more people are still playing it more than 2042. Like 2042, I think, finally has left Battlefield in a really precarious state. And I don't know how it can, like, I don't think Battlefield can ever be great again, because if this is the state that this franchise is, when they said we're not doing anything else because we're laser focusing on this thing because this is the best thing we do here, and it's still below the par for even games that came out before, it's like, I have no words.
To piggyback on everything that you said, which is all I'm in agreement for, it's a game that even if you are more focused on the core that's there and you can look past all of the other problems, there is just not enough content to justify continuing to play it.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that for something like Battlefield 4 compared to Battlefield 2042, I don't know any of the stats to be able to really give hard numbers, but for each level, you were unlocking something in Battlefield 4.
Mhm.
You were getting some sort of new weapon, new attachment for the weapon you were using, equipment pieces, cosmetics for your soldier, camos for the guns and the soldiers. Within like 8 or so different game modes that you could play, including ones that just do away with vehicles or like team deathmatch, rush, all of the great stuff. And then you put that into 2042, where you have, I think, 4 guns for each category max. And there's like 20 levels between each of them.
And a whole mess with the class system also. Like
the class system, the equipment that you don't unlock until like level 50 or 60 or 70, that is like very important, like the laser designation, which allows dumbfire rockets to lock on, which is a very like battle changing level of ability, is like rank 56, I think. And I think even for the amount of game that I played, I think I was only in like the 20s, like maybe 30.
And you play with your crew.
And I play with my crew a good amount. And then not to mention that is for only the main thing. If you wanted to play Portal, it kneecaps your experience for any of those weapons. And like, granted, there were ways people were using to circumvent the system to unlock all the attachments. But when you have to do that to actually be able to play the rest of the game that is offered, because your other option is like 2 guns and 3 operators or whatever, specialists that they call them, it's like you have to beat the system to actually be able to play the game, and that's not how it should be at all. And there's 2 game modes compared to like the 8 that all of these previous ones had, and everything else is in Portal. So even if, like, what they did, I knew they were going to do this, they added Rush back into the game, but only as a Portal mode. So you can't get all of the experience through playing the main game type
and not only that, it's like,
known for.
Right now it's only available through Battlefield Bad Company 2's Portal, so not even the 2042 one.
Yeah. And well, actually no, they did add it, so it's 2042 Rush, but it's still like it's kneecapping your experience in all the other categories. And then you've got all of the problems with like 1942, let's see,
Battlefield 3,
42, yeah, Battlefield 3,
Bad Company 2,
Bad Company 2, and then 2042. So it's like all of these sort of similar options, and like maybe it's a personal thing for me as well, but when you're playing in the futuristic one, you can't play with any of the previous weaponry, so you're forced to play with that modern or futuristic one. But the guns in Bad Company 2, which are modern day guns, are better. And you just can't play as them for no reason. They're like, no, we've moved on to the,
and they don't have the attachments where you hold the left bumper,
right?
Kind of like
so you have to like redo from there, which I will say I do appreciate the on the fly attachment changer. That's
cool ideas.
Nice.
It's cool ideas.
I love it. But then it's like you just it's so much missed potential, so much frustration going through that. And then we haven't even talked about the problems with stability, the crashing, the servers, at least they fixed the flickering, you know. The lack of, I think we couldn't even like join on our friends at certain points if you were in a match. It's just so little to actually do, and it's so annoying. So yeah, that's easily most disappointing
game of 2021. Yeah, there's definitely worse games, but at least just from potential alone and what it means for such a respected series, is like, I would have hoped like EA, especially after the year EA had in 2021, where compared to the other 2 companies, like they're more immediate competitors in Activision and Ubisoft, they weren't having quite as bad a year, but this is still like the PAL that's cast on top of on top of a bunch of good stuff from that year. And it's unfortunate, especially for Battlefield, because for now it's clear now Battlefield is never going to be respected again, because you fumble like out of 4 main DICE games from the last 4 main DICE ones, Battlefield 4, Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5, now this one, 3 have missed when it matters most at launch, and only one of them launched well, and it was helped a lot by that Call of Duty was especially weak that year in 2016. But it's like 1 out of 4 over almost 10 years, almost close to 10 years now. Not a good look. So really sad, because I wanted Battlefield to be better again, but at least this is now the flashpoint now where whenever we hear one of these companies be like, we're only laser focusing on one thing despite our previous entries being more fully featured, BS. Straight up BS now, because 2042 doing this came out even worse than what we've gotten for Battlefield, and that's super sad. And I can imagine, especially because Battlefield is like, for many people are not in tune in the gaming industry like you are and all that they have their big AAA stuff that they are expecting. Battlefield missing like that, and on top of that, Call of Duty not being as hot as it could have been, is probably why for a lot of them they were angry with 2021. Because Battlefield 2021 is the Battlefield 2042 is the kind of game that sometimes defines what AAA is for some people. The people that don't venture to the sides to see that there's more than just the core. So it's a personification for why some people are down on 2021 when, based on my top 10, people shouldn't have. So back into positive things. Now the big positive, Paul. The best 10 games that we played this year. Number 10 for you.
Deathloop,
okay.
It barely made it in after everything else that I quantified and qualified. However, I will say I had such a unique and fun experience with Deathloop because it perfectly we're going to talk about it later, but I think it does for me what I was looking for in the Hitman games, where you have a closed environment that you need to do, but how you do that is fully up to you. But the mechanics and the smoothness of play for it were exactly what I needed to be able to truly do what I wanted with it. And I know that like you'll be able to clown on me for some of it, and I fully respect that, and we're going to talk about some of it later, I think. But I loved how unique, fun, moment to moment. I felt like, hey, what if I combine these two things and then just went with it, and then turns out it worked out. That's the kind of freedom that I love in a game. I love Arcane Studios, and it was fun overall. So that's what I was going to say on that. What about you?
Deathloop.
Hey.
Deathloop's my number 10 also. And and the thing is that Deathloop would have been higher had I not played Hitman. And my thing with Deathloop is that Deathloop is an illusion of choice, that once I went back to it after having finished it and realized that the game is just designed for you to find that one way that ends the game, broke it for me, because Arcane's games have always been the immersive sim of Arcane has always given you all these different tools that you can play and the different outcomes you can get through like the different endings and the non-lethal endings, the good, evil, whatever things, and the way you can mix all of that some people didn't click with that. And I feel Deathloop is like the baby for like dummy, like the Arcane for Dummies version of their games, which I will say, like, if this is what was needed for people to kind of like get in the door for Arcane games, I would say props for them. And I had a lot of fun playing through Deathloop, because I think gameplay wise, maybe it doesn't have the depth, but because of the technology we have in hand, where the game like runs super well and the kind of mechanics that it used, it was a really fun shooter to play. But it just kind of misses a little bit with the finally like trying to break it open after you kind of like see the illusion that it tries to play with. It feels like the kind of game that should have perfectly had infinite permutations of how you could approach it. And then it feels like it narrows itself down. And that hurt it a little bit in the replay value for me, but its style, Colt and Juliana, the dialogue, kind of like you mentioned that it was like a modern version of GoldenEye, and it had that kind of thing. And I feel that's what made that game really enjoyable. Even though I think now that I've thought about it, it's probably Arcane's weakest game. And that's still one of the best games that came out this year, because Arcane is so darn good. So, yeah. What's your number 9, Paul?
Number 9 for me was It Takes Two.
Okay.
I enjoyed it a lot, but I still haven't fully finished it
Mm-hmm.
because of course I have to only play it whenever I have somebody else there,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm currently playing through it with my wife, and we have chosen to play Overcooked instead whenever
Mm-hmm.
she has the inkling to play a game, because she loves cooking and she loves that style of game a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And she's sometimes turned off by the challenge of really pushing the hand-eye coordination of camera and
Mm-hmm.
movement, which I fully respect. And it's difficult to really master that side of it, especially if you're a newcomer to most games and what you play is Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really it. But when it plays, and it's so fun for them to fully flesh out these different game mechanics that perfectly complement one another. You cannot fully carry the other person 100% through the game, which would of course diminish their enjoyment of it. It forces both characters to work in tandem to actually do something, but they also have moments of like mini games that you can play either co-op or against each other to just mess around with it and learn the mechanics better.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a good way for, I think, new gamers to get into gaming, and especially couples to get into gaming, and therefore more women to get into gaming, which we need a lot more of, honestly. And I say it does everything that it's supposed to do very well.
It Takes Two, a game I didn't play, so it's
Yep.
not on my list. I wish I could, especially because I was the one that I championed that one to win in Game of the Year at the Game Awards, but mostly because of the conversation I've seen around that game.
Right.
So yeah, that's like the only thing I have for It Takes Two. But hopefully one time, like I know it's on Game Pass, so maybe I can play through there. But again, I kind of want to play with someone. So
Right.
and you have it on PS5. So
Yeah, so if you, I guess, find it on sale,
Mhm.
maybe we can play through it
Yeah,
someday.
it's been for $20, but I didn't know if you were playing it, so I didn't kind of bite the bullet for it. So
Mm. And $20 is like for just a few hours.
Mhm.
It depends on what your priorities are. But yeah,
yeah. Number 9
let's
for me,
see. Yeah, what's for you?
Mass Effect Legendary Edition. I
Yeah.
am putting Mass Effect Legendary Edition here specifically through for Mass Effect 1. That's the game that got most improved by this Legendary Edition.
True.
That's the one that updated its gameplay to not quite Mass Effect 2 and 3 levels, but in a way that makes it feel like a proper video game. Because Mass Effect 1, try to play that 360 version of that game right now for the first time. The gameplay of that game, it's poop compared to what came after. And
I remember I would just skip straight to Mass Effect 2 and all
Mhm.
my replays of the series.
Exactly, and what's sad is that I would argue that Mass Effect 1 has probably the best story, like in a grander
agree.
scale, like from what you expect from like a space opera, because then the second game has better narrative in the smaller moments.
But it's also more focused.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's more intimate. Mass Effect 2
Yeah.
works because of its intimate moments, like in a very blanket way. It's like that game's about the suicide mission.
Mhm.
That's like the main objective. You know about that main objective, how you get to
Everything's
that,
about that.
and everything is how you color your way into that suicide mission.
Mhm.
And Mass Effect 1 feels more like the grander than life sci-fi epic you kind of want, and it's really cool that now through the Legendary Edition, it's like Mass Effect 1 feels so polished in a way that you don't get screwed by the checkpoints, you don't get screwed by weird combat glitches. Like the combat now feels like you can kind of like experiment with the depth of the combat now through this Legendary Edition in a way that, because you were fearing that the game would break over on the 360 back then, like
Yeah.
that maybe it didn't really feel like it was realizing its full potential. It wasn't 100% perfect because I posted some pictures that I feel like there's some changes they made to the lighting that kind of like destroyed some of the mood of certain sections, but it's still like you're like some visual identity. Some places were like more purplish and more like greenish, and some of the way it's colored, that the lighting in the Legendary Edition felt more like muted in those sections because they changed they updated the engine that game was running for. But I would say it's worth it because it makes the game so much more enjoyable now, to the point where I remember when I mentioned this, that before, when I played Mass Effect 1 on 360 and jumping to Mass Effect 2, the jump was massive and you were so pleased. Now the jump from Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect 2, not as pronounced. And
That's
even
true.
then, now, because gameplay wise, one got tightened, now you feel things are missing on Mass Effect 2. So that's it's really interesting that way. So I would say just on the strength of Mass Effect 1, because 2 and 3 I didn't finish because I did my full replay of the series back in quarantine in 2020. So I only dabble in 2 and 3. It was like they look exactly as I remember, but running smoother. So, but the first game makes the Legendary Edition worth it. And now it's on Game Pass for people that are over there on Xbox and haven't played. Definitely try it. What's your number 8, Paul?
Banner Saga.
Okay.
So specifically the first game.
Mm-hmm.
I remembered having gone through my purchase list, as I mentioned before we started recording, because I could not remember what I had played at the start of this year.
Mm-hmm. Banner Saga, I don't think it's a 2021 game, but
it wasn't. But that's when I played it,
and it works. Mm-hmm.
Right. So the whole series was on sale for like $10 or something in total. And I picked that up, and I swear I have not played a game that it's either like I have never played a game like that before, or it reminds me of like those choose your adventure games from like the really old days. And just how unique everything was, how stumbling through, but like just like I mentioned earlier with This Is the Police, where it's a game that gives you the illusion of choice but will just berate you at all times. This one is punishing, but it's in a way that it makes you feel like every happy ending / moment is earned. Every victory is earned. It's like they will pat you on the back for choosing the right answer, to say, hey, you know what, this thing went south and you picked the right answer, here you go, here's some benefits. And just the aesthetic, the music, the dialogue, the plot, the world that you like get bare glimpses of. Like in almost, I don't want to do the same thing that everyone else does, but you know, like in Breath of the Wild, where they give you that suggestion of world building, where I'm watching a video right now that talks about this hole that is blasted in a mountain that like is off in the distance, and there's no visible mention of it in any of the lore, but it's for you to kind of piece together what you think might have happened in this real lived in world. And I feel like Banner Saga achieves that, where you've got these things that are happening and you just kind of like piece it together yourself, but it never takes away from the main things happening in the world. And I love some of those things whenever it's not too in my face, but also just enough. So yeah, overall it was just really fun. And then it's got Fire Emblem based combat, so I was like, hey, I already kind of understand this. And even if it kind of kicked my butt at times, even if I lost a game, it would tie itself back into the story,
and you played it this year, so
yeah,
it counts
early this year. And I still haven't finished the rest of them because I just want to sit down, just like with another one later on in this list. I only want to play it when I really want to sink my teeth into it, because I just enjoy myself with those. So yeah, that's my number 8. What about you?
Considering how much time we dedicated to this game, Metroid Dread. A game that
it made it.
Yeah, a game that we spent 3.5 weeks kind of like all over this. First on debating whether we were gonna get it, then PJ kind of convincing me by paying for some of it so I could play it, and me being so high in some of those moments, and then kind of like convincing you and Zach to play it, and finally kind of like understanding some of the things that I really love about it, and really finally nailing the things that I don't. I still stand by a lot of what I said about that being a really fun Metroidvania when we played it.
Same. Yeah.
And it's such a tight controlling game that I feel it has some really cool design elements to it. I just can't now hold back and say, it's like, as a Metroidvania, like what that genre has been, other games just does the Metroidvania stuff better. It just does it. It's like, that's like, I don't care how like well designed Metroid is. It's like there's so many design things that games like Ori and the Blind Forest and
Hollow Knight,
all these
Axiom
games,
Verge,
Axiom
all
Verge,
that.
like all of these things have been like, we can't give Nintendo a pass for like completely ignoring the ways the genre has advanced. How kind of how we were saying, like
Yeah.
that kind of genre has advanced, and it's less forgiving to just because something else is like it's so well made that you can kind of be like, it's always been like that, so you don't kind of like, that's what it is. But I'll say this, like, I really had it. It's in the Nintendo Switch. I didn't have a better time this year than Metroid Dread. Like, I really didn't. It was when I tried to like replay it that I was like, you know what? It's like a lot of the things that I didn't like about this are kind of like creeping, because this was when I finished it, I thought this was gonna be like number one, number two. It was gonna be up there considering all the time that we dedicated to it. But then it was just true to myself. I was like, I enjoyed this a lot, but I think I just preferred other games this year.
Same.
And but it gave us some great content, and it gave us some like, one of our favorite episodes was when we got PJ in, because I was expecting it to be a complete dumpster
It was
fire.
such a long episode, and it was so good.
Yeah, because we finally
yeah.
kind of like nailed in some of the things that where it worked and where it didn't, and I feel like what makes me excited is the fact that Metroid Dread finally feels to be like the Metroid that broke into the mainstream a little bit more than others. It's Soul.
Which I respect it for that.
Yeah,
Because now they can move forward from that new audience
and improve
hopefully
some of the things. Yeah, exactly. Like no more cheap boss fight at the end that unravels you.
Yeah. And oh boy, did it unravel me. I was like, I was to the point, I don't rage about games, but enough of my body language changed that my wife had to ask me if I was okay, because I was just like like I was tense, I was breathing heavy, I was like, I was feeling
you felt insulted by that.
I was so insulted and frustrated and disrespected, and I'll tell you right now, it's not even on any of my lists because
of that
it's
feeling,
like
right?
not quite. It could not get to the honorable mentions, and it wasn't like worst. It was
disappointing. Yeah.
If I'm honest, it could have. I could have made the argument that it was most disappointing, but at the same time, it had such decent gameplay in every other moment except for those fights, and specifically the final boss. That it knocked it out of it enough for me, and now I'm like, I don't even want to revisit it. I don't want to try it again. It's had its time, and let's see what they do next.
Yeah, I will appreciate, the one thing I do appreciate about Metroid Dread is that it made me go through the entire series this past year. If you remember, I was just like all of Metroid's butt for a while. So again, like, very enjoyable game. They're probably one of my favorite games that I played on Switch. But then again, it's like, I just have to call it as I see it. It's like, as someone that actually plays the Metroidvania genre very extensively, it's like, I just know of other games that just do a lot of the things that Metroid does better. The things that I feel are very fundamental to bring the whole package together. But because a lot of people were very starved from Metroid, it was very easy for a lot of people to kind of like ignore it. But the fact that no one has given it Game of the Year kind of plays out the whole thing. Just saying. Number 7, Paul.
Guilty Gear Strive.
Great fighter.
Yes.
Almost bought it yesterday.
It was really okay. So it's a game that I was actually just thinking about recently that I wanted to re-download and continue playing, trying to get better at it, because it's a game that outdoes a lot of the problems for fighting games, where most fighting games, the main problems are you feel like you're getting curb stomped by people who've been playing the game since the beginning, and it is so difficult to spend the time learning a new character. But the benefits for Guilty Gear Strive is that each character, while there's like a tier list of, all right, these are the easier characters, these are the harder ones, it feels like you can still understand how most of the people work, and you can do decent with anyone. The other thing is that there's tier lists in the matchmaking that guarantee that you're going to at least be closer to people of your category, and it's like visually represented. It's not just let me click matchmaking and hope for the best. It's a lobby, and it's full of people who you know are listed as close to your level. So even if you get curb stomped, you're going to drop lower on that tower, and you're going to end up in an area where you can actually play against people and work your way back up, which has happened to me constantly. Every time I leave the game, I come back to it, I'm already high up, I lose like 2 matches, and then the game knows, oh, you suck now, let's just lower that up. And say they overshoot it, you can still work your way up a lot easier anyway. So it's so gorgeous, it plays so well, and it outdoes a lot of the problems of most fighting games. So therefore, because of that, it's earned its spot at number 7. What is your number 7?
Outriders.
Yes,
your honorable mention. It was actually my number 7 for this particular reason. It is the looter shooter I've been wanting as an alternative to Destiny. It's what I thought Borderlands used to be before I finally fell off of Borderlands after Borderlands 3. It's what I wanted The Division and Anthem to be, until I realized that they were treating themselves as full-time jobs at a time where I already had made Destiny my full-time job. And the thing I respect the most about Outriders is just how outrageously ridiculous it is with its powers, with the way the loot works, and that it respects your time to let you go. I am so happy that it's a game that it's not one that I had to obligate. Like, not that this sounds bad, but one of the things that Destiny has is that because it's an ongoing live service game, sometimes you feel like you have to kind of go back to it so you don't fall behind because it's always moving forward. Outriders is more is a more traditional video game, but it has the addictive quality of its loot. Its world tier system, like I mentioned, it's so brilliant in giving you that kind of like help push you up a difficulty if you kind of want to challenge yourself a little bit more to get even better rewards, but not punishing you for not pushing that extra mile, because the game is just designed for you to have so much fun, especially the way build crafting works in that game, where especially like, and you knowing how you're into aesthetics, the transmog system of Outriders is so good, especially it being free and you're being able to kind of like keep the look that you want, even in weapons, all of that, to kind of keep that aesthetic,
which I respect so much.
And especially its mod system with its weapons, and like being able, you find like some, I found a good combo of like a fusion blast and fireworks thing that kind of like helped with DPS, especially combined with I played as a pyromancer in my first playthrough. I think you did too.
Yep.
The fire dude, and getting to mix all of that, there's a crunchy, satisfying quality to that game's combat that reminds me of Gears of War. This is like if Gears of War would be a looter shooter with superpowers, that's what Outriders would be, which makes sense. People Can Fly, the developers, made Gears of War Judgment, so they worked on Gears before.
Do not let Gears, Epic Games, and the Coalition find out that they can make a looter shooter based on Gears of War, because they will. My goodness, just I guess a couple of things for Outriders for me, like as you said, the transmog system, the ability that if you get a really good roll of benefiting one of your powers, you can put that on to better gear, was like game changing for me, because at first I was like, shoot, I have to hold on to this crappy gear because it has a good roll on something that I use, and then I found out that I could just put that on new gear, and it's so easy to move around. It's just efficient. It's simpler.
It's pro gamer.
It's basically, and it respects my time, as you said, because like once you beat the game, it's like, all right, we'll see you whenever our next expansion is. Bye. You don't need to keep playing it every day to
there's
do your daily quests.
There's this expeditions if you want a chance for gear, but it's like you don't feel like that obligation to stay into the treadmill. That's so important with games right now, like being able, because that way then you leave satisfied. And that was my thing, like when I finished Outriders compared to like when I finished The Division or Anthem or this other many million looter shooters that we have gotten, a Crisis of Infinite looter shooters, as one said in 2019, that sometimes even Destiny has this problem. At times you leave Destiny very satisfied. At times you feel like you leave Destiny like you were gypped out of your time sometimes. And it something has that pull and that tug and pull with that one. Outriders didn't have that for me. It always felt like it was always rewarding me with something, and I feel that it's finally. And the thing is that Outriders were played at the best time because this game was borked back in July. It was like deleting people's gear some bug.
Yeah.
Imagine so that would be really bad. But I played through it with the New Horizon update that was completely free. That's the one that
Right.
reworked a bunch of the systems, and I feel they nailed it. This is like, I'm full Outriders now, and I can't wait for them to release this next expansion that's coming in 2022, because this is the alternative for Destiny that I've always wanted, and I'm glad for that. Number 6, Paul.
Destiny 2 Beyond Light for me.
Yes.
So I won't say really anything more. I've already kind of said everything that I needed to say. It's such a wonderful breath of fresh air returning to Destiny 2 with somebody that actually understands where it currently is. And being able to walk me through it, because we don't talk about it much, but I went hard on Warframe for a few years back in the day, and once again it was unplayable until I had somebody who understood the game, and then when they explained it to me, I could just enjoy the heck out of it.
And good thing you had me for Destiny.
Right, and so every question I'm randomly playing, and I'm like, hey, how do you do this thing? Or where's this thing? Or what is that? And then you can give me a 2-second answer that doesn't require me to find the encyclopedic level of knowledge or YouTube videos or all that nonsense. But now I get to enjoy the gameplay loop and take each expansion and understanding of things as they come, but I don't feel like I have to just keep playing it constantly, because I got bit by the bug for a while, and I was playing it every single day for like several hours
during the Splicer
and
season.
I couldn't put it down, but I also felt like I wasn't allowed to put it down. But now I understood that it's like, all right, I've played certain things, even if there's more to do, I need to like have that hard lock and then return later.
Yeah, I feel like it's gotten better at giving us that time, so we don't feel like we always have to be there. So, and
I was just gonna say, all you need to really do after a certain point is like your god rolls and daily quests and a couple little things, but it's like you really don't need to do that. If you got a good enough, you can make it work.
Exactly.
Which I respect. And the only thing I guess they could improve for me is better transmog again, and freaking give me more vault space. I know it's like a deep problem it's a hot button issue,
but they gotta fix it. They gotta fix the vault space. If it wants to be a collection game, it has to fix the vault space.
Because I was watching, like, I follow Cacus HD on Twitter, and he was like, this is what's going to get me attacked by Destiny fans, but like you need more than 500. And of course everyone's like, oh, you just got to delete your old stuff that's been sunset. It's like, no, you shouldn't have to. If the game is this big with that many weapons, if you want at least one roll of each weapon, you've got to like get more vault space, or you just have to get rid of things that are very valuable. And I just don't think that's worth it. But anyway, all that is to say, Destiny 2 Beyond Light, and pretty much everything before that is my 2021 rank 6. What is yours?
Returnal.
Hey.
Housemarque's Returnal. A game that I had to wait until they patched in the save state, which happened very late in the year, for me to really get into it. And thank God they did, because my God, that game's hard. Holy crap, that game's hard, and it can be heartbreakingly hard. But by them adding that kind of save state that you can kind of save scum, it can kind of help you not feel too demoralized at the fact that you have to kind of start runs from the very beginning, because it's a roguelike. But I tell you, there's probably in 2021 no better playing third-person shooter than Returnal. Like the way, just how the controller feels in your hands, like how tight.
Right, because they have all the adaptive stuff going on in that, right?
Yeah, not only that, it's just like the movement in that game is so quick, it's so arcadey, and that it's the kind of game, you know how there's some kind of games that are like so tight controlling and so hard that then mastering by you having the dexterity in your controller can really push you forward. That's Returnal. And the way this game has been inspired by the Geiger alien aesthetic, and the diversity of the new biomes, the satisfaction of reaching, because there's 5 biomes total, and kind of like being able to keep pushing and sometimes getting the luck of the draw with having. I have this amazing shotgun that's like long range, that's like DPS things really tough, really hard, that when you feel like you finally got the perfect build because the game is randomized, just being able to kind of push through and kind of learn the very interesting story about why this lady named Celine, if I remember her name, why is she stuck in this really elaborate time loop. It ended up being more satisfying than initially I thought it was going to be, because initially when I started playing it and lost, when there was like no save spot, I was like, I don't think this is going to be for me. But I'm glad it is. Yeah, and I'm glad that I was able to push through, because very enjoyable. It's probably one of the more enjoyable games to play that you can find on the PS5 right now, especially when the console is very starving for actual exclusives that are not on PS4. So, number 5, right. Paul.
Top 5. I kind of thought this was going to be higher, but the longer that it's been since I've played it, the further down it's dropped, and that is Halo Infinite.
Okay.
What I love in the game mechanics is just like the freedom, once again, of being able to tackle things the way I want to. Mm-hmm. I grab any of those replicated weapons that are just wonderful. But it also made me realize that I started to break the game unintentionally. Mm-hmm. And I hate that I keep revisiting it, but the famous quote from the XCOM 2 developer saying that if you give players the option, they will choose the most boring and easiest option every time. Mm-hmm. Which made me realize that when I play Halo, I pick whatever the most powerful thing is, but obviously that's usually balanced because there's so few ammunition of it. Mm-hmm. But if I can replicate a rocket launcher every time I visit a base, I'm breaking the game, and I'm going to choose that every time. I'm going to take a rocket launcher and a gravity hammer. And so it's made me almost not even touch many of the most beloved weapons. Like, I barely touched the sniper rifle. Mm-hmm. I barely touched most of the others going on in there. A lot of the Covenant weapons I just didn't want to bother with. The Needler, one of the most powerful weapons in most of the other games. Mm-hmm. I think I used it like once when I had to. So I guess that was one reason why it's lower on my list. And the other is that the longer I thought about it, I think I remember more about Halo 4 and 5 mm-hmm. than the actual campaign for Halo Infinite. It's just so forgettable. And
you know why, right? Because there's no biome diversity.
Yeah, I mean,
everything blurs together.
I mean, I love the few characters that are in there, but they're just not giving me what I loved in people like Sergeant Johnson, in Commander Hood, or mm-hmm. Captain Hood, whatever his name was, Miranda Keyes, Captain Keyes himself. Mm-hmm. Just like, there's not that same level. And I understand that it's supposed to be a new jumping off point. You're mm-hmm. starting off with a much smaller cast, but it's just, it's missing something for me.
Just to jump in, Halo Infinite is my number 5 also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Halo Infinite is on my number 5, and I kind of agree with that. Like, I feel Halo Infinite is carried more for the promise of what could come after, because it's just a throat clearing epilogue / for Halo 5 and a prologue for whatever ends up happening. And
right, my
fear of the lack of biome diversity plays out, because you miss having something that then you think about and you remember this happened. There are a few moments that I remember. I remember the first 2 missions of Halo Infinite. Like, the first time you go through that Forerunner environment that then is repeated ad nauseum, or the very beginning that's like that starts with him waking up and going to the banished ship. Like, that starts with like the quiet moment, and that then leads for you meeting the weapon. I feel there's some good story moments, especially near the end, where it finally deals with Halo 5 and what happens with Cortana and all of that. But everything with the Banished was just kind of, like I mentioned, it feels like those superhero shows that do like a villain of the week for the season premiere.
It was a filler show.
Yeah, so that's how the Banished, with like the Ereshkigal, that guys that always preaches at you. Yeah, that's kind of how that feels. That then when you're finally and you beat the Harbinger at the end, that teases the coming of a new enemy that you never see. Now that's like the promise of
Yeah.
what's coming next. Then it makes the campaign feel not everything it can be. But from a gameplay perspective, what the Halo Infinite does for Halo, especially with the grappling hook,
That
it's
grappling
some
hook
of them.
carries
Yeah.
that whole game.
Yes, especially because I restarted the game again, like just to kind of, because there's no way you can pick levels in this one. You have to, because it's like one open world game that kind of just goes. When you start at the beginning where you have the grappling hook without the upgrades, it feels so weird. Like I got to show you like the Superman punch that sends a shockwave. That's such intrinsic to how I feel the gameplay loop for Halo has to be now. That I feel this game is a revelation when it comes to Halo gameplay, but more work has to be done to create a more memorable campaign now. Because just having that Pacific Northeast kind of like greenish biome and the Forerunner is like, it's kind of exactly what I feared it was going to be. It's like it just becomes one blurred, so you don't remember moments. Even in Halo 5, you will remember when we were running down the Guardian, when we got to Meridian. Even though this Halo Infinite tells a better story than 5, because 5 was so messy, but that's kind of like the Halo Infinite took the gamble of doing something different with open world. And I will say this, like, this is like the only open world I played this year that I enjoyed, because I 100%ed this whole thing. I found all the skulls, I found all the high value targets. Like, I did everything in that map because it wasn't too big. It's like kind of what I mentioned, is like it reminds me of the old Ubisoft, the Assassin's Creed 2 Ubisoft, that didn't get too bloated. You could still feel like you can do everything and feel like you got enough of the game that you feel satisfied, but not eaten enough that makes you feel sick in your stomach. So, and Halo Infinite, highly carried here by its multiplayer. Also, the multiplayer for Halo Infinite is so darn good. This is the best Halo Infinite has ever been in multiplayer. That I just feel that that's what carries a lot of water with this package. I'm not the multiplayer guy, and I played more Halo Infinite multiplayer than I dare even kind of like accept, because I'm not that kind of guy these days. I'm more of a single player guy, which means that they got something good with it, even though the progression of that game sucks. But strong fundamentals. I think I'm excited for what's coming with Halo, but let's hope for even better, even more. But yeah, I enjoyed it because Halo Infinite could have been bad. Remember, it got delayed out of its launch. So, number 4, Paul.
Resident Evil
Village.
8 Village. Mm-hmm. I have not much more to say outside of what we've already discussed. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that I very badly did some math.
Mm-hmm.
And
really?
My number one game did not come out in 2021, and I just misremembered it completely.
Really?
So I might be scrambling briefly. So anyway,
that's awesome.
I completely misremembered it. So anyway, Resident Evil 8. I just enjoyed it so much. It was a wonderful campy ride. Just like you said, it was like a haunted mansion ride that you get on and you have fun with it throughout. And
it's just outlandish. It's incredibly outlandish.
But it's like it follows with the cliches, but it just does them in such a fun way that I don't mind, that it's kind of retreading certain aesthetics. Like there is the four horror aesthetics that everyone knows. The castle, the creepy dollhouse, the weird fish like H.P. Lovecraft, and the weird industry body horror of like Frankenstein. And it's like those are like the main ones, and like, you know, vampires at the start with the castle thing. And they just kind of blended together in one big game, and we're just like, we don't care if it like really clashes, it's just fun. And I really respect that.
Can't wait to play. Like, can't wait to get to the other 3 sections, because I'm just done with the castle horror now.
And then, like I mentioned, with Capcom just being the kings of New Game Plus, it becomes even more fun to keep playing the game after you've beaten it, because like you get weapons and weapon types that you don't experience the whole rest of the time. And you get your infinite ammo, you get your mercenaries mode, you get excuse me, all the other crazy stuff that you get to do. Plus the intrigue with the plot itself is just like I did not expect to enjoy that game as much as I did, but I'm also glad that I waited so long to get it on sale for, I don't even remember
40.
how much.
It was 40
40?
bucks.
Okay. Um, for the Halloween sale, that's what it was. But it was a lot of fun. So, yeah. As far as before you get to say yours, I'm going to amend everything and say that we're just gonna number all of mine up one, and we're gonna throw some random thing like Castlevania Circle the Moon at number 10.
Oh, okay.
Because I did enjoy that game a lot. I'll just very
So
old
Resident Evil
Game
was
Boy
number
Advance.
3 then.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we're just gonna bump everything up one for
Okay.
that, because
And then we'll
I'll-
read them all at the end. So I'll
Yeah.
I'll say my number 4 and number 3 then. Back
yeah,
to
go
back.
ahead.
So number 4, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Now, this is an interesting one because you have only heard me kind of like just complain about how the SSD was kind of oversold with this game, and that sucks. That's something your takeaway, because this game is fantastic. Like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is like an excellent Ratchet and Clank game. It's like there's something about Ratchet and Clank games that they're like the perfect kind of comfort food, that every time that one of these come out, you know what you're getting from them. They're addicting, they're beautiful, especially this one with the PS5. Like what it does is like, kind of like I mentioned, is that yes, you can complain that maybe the whole thing with the quick loading from world to world is maybe not what you would have expected based on how they were selling it, but still very impressive seeing it happen. And at the fidelity it happens. This game is a stunner. This game is something. This is the kind of game that you're like, I cannot believe games can be this pretty right now, this early.
Yeah.
And it just makes you more excited about what's coming up next. And I would say that Ratchet and Clank: A Crack in Time, the 2009 one, is probably still the finest in the series, but I would say like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is probably second best. It's kind of like in that caliber. And
where would you put the 2016 game then?
I still go back and forth if I like this one better or if I like the 2016 better, because the 2016 game is more consistent, because there's a couple things in Rift Apart that you're like, I don't like that section. They could have done this, could have been good if they didn't have this unnecessary kind of detour here. But maybe the Rift Apart has higher highs. 2016 is more even kill.
Okay.
Both excellent games. But then there's always kind of like the caveat that it depends how eager you are into playing a Ratchet and Clank, because they're also similar in a way. So it's kind of, and again, it was an early problem I had earlier this year where Rift Apart was one of the first things that I played on PS5 when I finally got it, but I had just come up from like replaying a bunch of them from PS3 that I never did. So I told you I went through my Borderlands 3 problem of like, can there be too much of one same thing? So especially if it doesn't change. I waited for the mood to strike on that one, and I did, and I still enjoyed it. And it wasn't that much of a time commitment either. So very enjoyable time. And number 3, Kena Breach of Spirits. Now, this is one that I thought was going to be my game of the year. Like, I was enchanted by this game, by its quirk, by its visual majesty. Knowing this is this indie studio, Ember Labs, first ever video game, because they only did the Majora's Mask short that was visually stunning back in 2016. For a very first effort, Kena Breach of Spirits is like phenomenal. And not only that, I am very surprised how they were able to mostly mix a bunch of different games that I really like Uncharted, God of War, Dark Souls all together for the first time, and do a pretty decent job at it. Where this game kind of falls apart is near the end, that it has like massive Metroid Dread style difficulty spikes in like in the final bosses, that sometimes the only way to really beat them is to like really master the parry system, which is the one area in this game, or the one element in this game that I didn't feel they tuned right. Because there's the window for you to do like the parry, it's like it's so inconsistent and so
very arbitrary.
And so arbitrary that you can like, when you go back to like a game like even Jedi Fallen Order, Sekiro, or even God of War, like you know what the parry window is for those games. Even go back to the Souls games, and that's part of like the way you flow through the combat there. And I feel like they could have tuned that a little better, because sometimes that would make some of the later boss fights really cheap. And I did the mistake of not wanting to bump it too easy, because I was like, I want to do this in normal threats, and that probably hurt the placement of this thing. But I mean, it's still top 3. That still shows how much I loved what they did. And
for a first attempt, being their biggest problem being the window of their parry and the slight balancing problem, compared to something like Nintendo, who had all of the abilities still having that problem, is much less acceptable.
Exactly. When we're going back to the Metroid Dread conversation, it's like Nintendo's a story developer, and what they did was willfully ignore the ways that genre improved, while still doing a pretty kick-ass job by having a fun video game. But you can sometimes kind of like you can reconcile how great they've done in gameplay design versus some design decisions that the genre had already fixed. Easier to forgive Kena on that. And also the story, it's like there's something about the story in Kena that just highly resonates. So it's so melancholic, and there's just something about it, kind of like how it deals with kind of like the grief of the people that have passed, which ironically it's something that's also dealt in my second game, but I'm gonna talk about later. But yeah, it's like interesting ways some games deal with grief. But what's your number 2, Paul?
Kena Bridge of Spirits. So I'm just gonna briefly piggyback on some of what you were saying. I would imagine if I ever saw a true ground up creation of The Last Airbender, it would have the same vibe as this. It's just such a great, like, in gameplay, making you feel like Kena is competent, but she's definitely inexperienced. Felix, stop trying to attack things. He's trying to paw at rubber bands and my nail filer for some reason. Anyway, so like, you start off understanding where Kena is in the hierarchy of this world, and just like I mentioned earlier with background world building, where like we don't really understand or find out what truly happened besides brief glimpses of flashbacks that Kena has, once again diegetically showing it through story and gameplay, through the eyes of the character and the audience at the same time, what happened in this village, and not shying away from the immense difficult subject of grief and losing family members and letting lost family members kind of move on as we move on as well, is just so powerful. And I haven't seen it really done better in years, and I don't think we'll see it again for a while. But I loved
actually I would say it's funny that you mentioned it, because I would say that how a game deals with grief has also been dealt with this year in a game that I wasn't expecting it to be done, and that was my number 2, Guardians of the Galaxy. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay, yeah, good point, actually.
Because that game starts like, it's my number 2 second favorite game this year. The Guardians of the Galaxy was a massive surprise. Massive surprise, especially because of its narrative. Because you really connect with the Guardians like individual in that game, because all of them are like grieving something. It's like and you see the different ways all of them deal with the way they grieve. Like Peter Quill with his mother, Gamora with his sister, like Drax with his family. Elements that have been mentioned in the movies in a way, but this game, because you spend more time with these characters in this game than you do in the movies, they feel more rich, you understand them better, and it kind of hits you in the feels in a way that you wouldn't expect, especially like especially how that game comes down to a little girl experiencing the loss of her mother, and kind of like that world-ending thing, kind of like going down to.
I haven't quite finished it yet, so don't get too far beyond where I mentioned. But
it's kind of like you reach the point where you see who the big villain is and why she's doing this, and it's because of loss, and she's been tricked that she can circumvent this loss. And I'm really surprised that a Marvel game, especially from some of the characters that are more outlandish, like the Guardians of the Galaxy, that are more about being more irreverent. It's all about like the comedy and all that to be able to deal with that really carried a lot of water for me in that game, even when its gameplay is very okay. The combat on Guardians of the Galaxy, it's like not the best thing. Is like, as a third person shooter, I would pick Returnal over it in a way. Like, it has some jank. That game kind of like, I had to restart a checkpoint one time because a scripting didn't happen and Groot wasn't like putting like, do you know how you press L1 square for him to like put the bridge that you have to cover? So it had that, but I feel like as a from like a story perspective, it's like that Guardians of the Galaxy game like really deals with the subject matter in a way I was not expecting, and I'm not surprised why this game is like being so highly regarded, not just in the story. The story of that game really carries a lot of water. I will say though, it does feel like that story wants to end at many different points and the game just keeps going. That's kind of like has been my only drawback, because I feel like it feels like it's building to a crescendo and you have more game, and then again and then again and then again. So pacing wise, it kind of like trips over itself in a little bit, but it's still like, for a game by Eidos Montreal, the guys that made the Deus Ex games, for them to do a game that they're already good at narrative, but then for them to do a game that was so emotionally resonant, I was not expecting that, and for that is my second favorite game of the year.
And my first favorite game of the year was Guardians of the Galaxy.
There you go.
By default, because of my absolute foobar moment of math. I was once again, like you said, so surprised by it. I at first struggled a little bit with the shooting. I didn't like the damage, but I did tweak it after you mentioned it, and I have had no problems since then, because I like a little bit more of that forward momentum, because this game is much more linear than I thought it was going to be.
It's Uncharted 1 style linearity.
Basically.
We haven't gotten that kind of linear game.
And I definitely at first thought it was going to be like, because somebody told me it was going to like Mass Effect. I was like, okay, well, sure.
Mass Effect is in the Mass Effect of this game comes out with the conversations you have at the Milano, and sometimes within the missions when you find Drax and when you're nowhere.
Yeah.
Great resonant moment.
Yeah, Nowhere is surprisingly robust with its creation, and it was like, how many times do you actually go back there? Do you ever? 3? Okay.
Or two or three. One, but you go back.
Okay, because I've only been there once, and I was like, this gives me the vibe like this can't be this much work for one time going here. So, but still, it was really.
You go back to many levels, but through different perspectives. Like, and you're not walking through the same like. Yeah. Like for you to like get the same collectible twice if you miss it. It's like it's always different levels, but you go back to biomes.
Right. Like the Nova Corps place. I've been there like twice, sort of, but like you said, it's very different. Very different things are happening. Very different statuses of the place you go to make it visually different and interesting. I am really starting to click more with the combat, the vibe.
What's funny is that you tweaked it and I never did, and the combat still speeds up as you go through. It's all about just unlocking everyone else.
I think I just needed that extra push for Peter to feel a little more powerful, at least personally. But like you said, everyone else is already just killing it.
But he does. He gets more powerful just based on the things that he unlocks.
And I do very much enjoy all of that. But once again, it's one of those, like, I'm glad they have the option for preference to come into the conversation, as opposed to, oh, you don't like this, well, tough luck, just deal with it.
Accessibility. Like, this is great. Another great example of how, like, being able to tweak every little thing for you to, like, have the experience you want. It's there. You're not punished for it.
Right. And one of the biggest strengths of any comic book property that I could say is that, does this piece of media make me want to go back and read the source material? And for the first time, I feel like I actually want to go into the Guardians of the Galaxy comics to read more about them, because as much as I love the movies, everyone would tell me, oh, they changed so much for the movie that it's not very similar. But with this, it's like I get more of that, like, this is cosmic weirdness, but sci-fi absurdity, Discworld kind of stuff, and I'm enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would, because when I first watched 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy, I was in this like everything's got to be kind of realistic, with Star Wars being the weirdest part of sci-fi that I could go for. But now it's like, let's just do weird stuff. Let's have
this
fun
game's
with
weird.
it.
This game's weird, man.
It's
like
really weird.
Cosmo's
it
the
starts
best.
off with a space llama that you have to hunt down and can like teleport and stuff. So it gets weirder from there. But some of my favorite parts is like when everyone that's weird is interacting with somebody who's playing it completely straight, like Raker speaking to the rest of the Guardians of the Galaxy, and just like the weird antics you do to convince him to keep looking at you while Rocket is messing with that thing. And he's like, usually I play games a certain way, but I got so into the way I was thinking as Peter Quill that I just without hesitation tried to fake a heart attack in the game.
You did that one. I did that.
Because at first I was like, that one would make more sense to try to convince him, and I did it, but it worked out because it just played off of exactly the kind of environment that I was in, and it was hilarious. And I was just like, I can see this happening in like a true script in a movie, and it just worked in the end. And I was like actually audibly laughing in moments of stuff like that happening.
Cosmo,
oh my gosh. The
Russian dog.
space dog was, I didn't expect him to be such a large part of that game for that arc. And just every time he would do that stuff, the little voice activated ball shooter that he has in his office, like it all makes sense in universe, and it's just, it was an absolute joy of a time. And like I've mentioned earlier, I haven't quite finished it yet, but I've been working through it enough that it's like I haven't had much more fun than here. And so yeah, that's why it's my game of the year.
Yeah, that was almost my game of the year, but I would have been remiss to not call the actual best game of the year that came out at the beginning of 2021. Most people forgot that came out at the beginning of 2021, and that is Hitman 3.
Which is such a curveball for you. You've not mentioned it like at all.
Yeah, I've kept it in the.
So
I kept it in
me
DL.
some talks about this, because I've been seeing this game is on sale for $23.99, and I go back and forth every day on, do I want to get this? But it's the same as all the rest. Like, go ahead and give me.
Yeah, it depends on how willing you are to engage with a stealth game whose biggest rewards is being a silent assassin.
Yeah.
And doing it in the most weird, outlandish ways that you can't imagine you can, because the game is so well built in its design to kind of give you that freedom. The freedom I wanted Deathloop to have. That the only thing that Deathloop maybe has an advantage over Hitman is the fact that you prefer going guns blazing and all that kind of allows that, while Hitman is not that. But just how long you can stay in one level to do all the different challenges, and you're realizing, oh my god, you can start the level and go through here and go pick this up to start the sequence this way and flip it on its way, or just go straight, or find this costume. Just the amount of versatility you see with all the levels, especially the levels that they introduced with Hitman 3, like the Dubai building that you climb for your targets at the top, and then you see like the majesty of being outside the Dubai building and climbing. The mansion that has a little subplot that can lead you to your target, that's basically Knives Out, the movie.
Wow.
And you basically, you can hide you can become Daniel, you can knock out and grab the costume and become the Daniel Craig mystery solver of a mystery thing. And in Hitman 3, how replayable it is, that it's a game that you can always go in, because there's always new challenges within many different levels that bring back even levels from Hitman 1 and 2, and just the endless fun you can have on the safe scumming and trying to get that perfect kill, or even the most outlandish kill, especially with the way the physics of that game work. Hitman 3 is like, it just delivers on the fun of stealth. It's like the best stealth game you can currently play that's not called Metal Gear Solid 5. And it has a wackiness to it. It doesn't take itself seriously at all. It's not fart smelly. It's like, it's embraces the fact that it's just a murder sandbox. And thinking about games this year of intent of what it was trying to do, Hitman 3 is perfect. It's perfect in its objective. It's perfect in its design. There's very little of it that I can think of like trying to knock it down for anything. Like, for example, like at first I thought Guardians of the Galaxy was going to be my game of the year because I was enchanted by its story and all that then just feeling the pacing kind of grind to a halt with how many times it felt it was going to end, and thinking, but yeah, the gameplay is nothing that remarkable. Like, the gameplay in Hitman 3 as a stealth game is just so freaking good. And a lot of people forgot it because it was the first game that came out in 2021.
Yeah.
And obviously you also have to be willing to accept that Hitman 3 is not going to be like other stealth games. It's not a game that just allows you to like unleash weaponry. It's a game that penalizes you for just going guns blazing. So
yeah,
you can kind of have that thing. You can kind of have that knock against it. That's not a knock for me because the game's all about the creativity, about not having to go guns blazing. Even though there's a way that you can be in a corner, whack someone with your silent pistol and just walk out. But just the creativity and display. This is like this Hitman reimagining since 2016 onwards has always had that, but I feel it finally hit its perfect like balance with 3, especially getting all the content from Hitman 1, all the content from Hitman 2, now having more content coming in for Hitman 3 because now it has kind of like the perfect platform for it. It's like, this is for stealth aficionados like myself. Hitman 3 is Nirvana, and I can't think.
I think the first one that's getting 2 years worth of content.
Yeah,
because each of the other ones was just the 1 year, and then it was a sequel.
Yeah. Hitman 2 had a few. That's because it launched with a few and then had like a season pass. This one feels like it's heading into a second season pass, if I'm not mistaken, because you could buy a season pass for when the game launched from like that first year. Now we're getting a second year of that. Okay. And because this is the perfect realization of that, it's just a game that is so addicting. It's a game where you can kind of put a podcast on if you want and just see if you can kind of figure out like the way you can fulfill the different challenges and keep leveling up. It's excellent. It's like, it's a sad that it's again a prime example of why sometimes you don't want a game to release too early in the year, because recency bias can help you go down. And I feel like Hitman 3 was criminally overlooked by the time we got to reward season, but it's phenomenal game. It's like, at least in 2021, I can't think of a game that nails its design philosophy as well as it does, and that I had the most fun with. So yeah, that's Hitman 3, 2021 Game of the Year. I knew it was going to be a curveball because it's a game that I didn't want to mention much.
Fair enough.
For precisely that reason.
Yeah, and it's a game that I wish personally that I could just really get into.
Yeah, you just have to get over it yourself, because I was like that until I finally gave in to know that that's not the kind of game he wants to do. It's like you have to engage with like the outlandishness, like especially how often you can get stuck in a level just like redoing it over and over, feeling it with like the with some of the targets. It's a really excellent stuff, and I just wish we got more stealth games that were more brave with that kind of design.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is our full list, isn't it?
Yeah,
of
read
honorable mentions, of worst, and of our top 10.
Yeah, read your top 10 from bottom to...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just so that we remember.
So, with the recent edition, the last-minute edition, was number 10, Castlevania Circle of the Moon, Deathloop, It Takes Two, Banner Saga, Guilty Gear Strive, Destiny 2 Beyond Light, Halo Infinite, Resident Evil Village, Kena Bridge of Spirits, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Number 10, Deathloop. Number 9, Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Number 8, Metroid Dread. Number 7, Outriders. Number 6, Returnal. Number 5, Halo Infinite. Number 4, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Number 3, Kena Bridge of Spirits. Number 2, Guardians of the Galaxy. And number 1, Hitman 3.
I say that's a pretty solid year.
Yes. And we had quite a few similar ones near the top, with only the curveball at the end. We were this close for me to put in Guardians of the Galaxy number 1 also.
And it was close. Some of them were absolutely the same numbers, and if I hadn't absolutely gotten my math all butchered, we would have had the same for a good 2 or 3 of them.
Exactly. So 2021 solid year. Like I said, it's like, again, so pleased that in my top 10 I didn't see an open world game other than Halo Infinite, and that's still a Halo game. So
Yeah.
kind of shows it's like, without me looking, I'm getting what I want. Or especially now that I've probably taken a full break of the open worlds, maybe we're gonna get some again, and maybe I'll be finally in the mood for that. But I'm glad 2021 wasn't that. So will Horizon be the one that kind of reclicks me? Who knows? But
Will Horizon, will Elden Ring, will Breath of the Wild 2,
yeah.
will the unnamed Jedi Fallen Order sequel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We sure
we've
have a
got
lot
some
of
things
talk.
coming.
Yeah, because next week we're going to talk about what our most anticipated games that we know are coming in 2022 are going to be. So you already got my list ready. You have it ready. So
I have it ready.
so hopefully, depending how news break out for next week is going to be a more traditional episode. This was just the game of the year stuff.
Yeah.
And it was meaty. So
It was.
So yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Paul, where can people find you?
As always, y'all, you can find me at Dork of Art on Twitter, at Dork of Art as well on YouTube, and at AngelSword21 on Twitch. Alejandro, how about you?
They can find me at twitch.tv/theslayergiant. They can find me on Twitter at @A_DroSegovia. They can find me on Instagram at AlejandroSegovia93, and they can find my written content at thecriticalcorner.com, where I may put this list with more descriptions for why I put them in a longer write-up there. Maybe. As long as this sickness doesn't knock me out again. Yes. So, yeah, Paul, I'm glad we have restarted. We got a lot to look forward to this year, but we'll definitely talk about that next week. So, for everyone that listened to this episode, we want to thank you so much. You can always find us in podcast services not called Apple Podcasts, and you can always find us here at youtube.com/escape media. When are we going to be posting the episodes right now? Because we're just getting back to it. We're going to refine the schedule. So more about that next week. You'll see it live.
We're sick. We've got it figured out. We just need to get better and not die.
Exactly. So
that's the important thing.
So yeah. And new posting day will be announced soon. So by the time we post the next week episode. But until then, people, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time. And remember,
press X
to play.
Good night, everybody.
Hasta luego.